Welcome to The Carpenter's Daughter,
the show where we dig into politics, culture, faith, art, and everything in between.
Every week, we sit down to discuss the issues that really matter and that are shaping our world.
I'm Alexis Confer, artist, political organizer, and lover of a deep dive.
And I'm Iffy Ike, lawyer, author, and perpetual question asker.
Each week, we bring our curiosity and our commitment to community
to unpack what's happening, why it matters, and how it impacts us all.
This is The Carpenter's Daughter. Let's get into it.
Well. We are so excited to have this episode because we found the shortest person you could possibly speak to and got the biggest room for the shortest person. My dear friend, Din Tolbert. I'm going to read his bio and then I'm going to ask him why he's not talking to us about who he really is. But no, in all seriousness, we are so excited to have you here. So welcome to The Carpenter's Daughter. Din E. Tolbert. What does the E stand for?
Erasto.
We'll talk about that. Din E. Tolbert has more than a way with words. He has a clearly stated purpose for them. Through his keynotes, workshops, and poetry, Din creates disarmingly open and brave spaces where audiences are empowered to ask deeper questions and move beyond surface conversations. Din is Jeff and Patricia's youngest son, the founder and principal of Din Between the Lines, a proud girl dad, and a lover of the arts. Please welcome Din E. Tolbert. E stands again for
Erasto.
Erasto?
Erasto.
Erasto.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first, welcome.
Welcome, Din.
And then what is the story behind Erasto?
So my parents, Jeff and Patricia, got my name from a book. And so Din Erasto, as was told to me, means great man of peace.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it just created a curiosity around names and naming. And I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I've taken a journey of what my name means in different languages, and all of it just kind of rings true. So they did a good job.
Wow, that's beautiful. I'm glad if he asked what the E stood for.
I know.
I feel very grounded.
I'm upset that I never asked you.
I mean, in all fairness, how often do we talk about middle names?
I don't have one, so
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, mine's Nicole, like every other person born in the 80s. Well, Din, we're thrilled to have you here today. It's just a real honor, and this will not feel that strange to you, given some of your journey in the faith space. But we like to break up the different areas of this in the way you would do a service. And so we're going to talk about, what is your light? Also, shout out to Patricia's, who are our moms. My mom's also Patricia. She goes by Trish. She goes by Trish. So shout out
we're going to get so many
to the
comments
Patricias and Trishas. So what is bringing you light these days? We like to start at light so we can get really heavy in the middle about flipping tables and, getting into the nitty gritty.
It's the setup for the knockout. What's bringing me light? Always super grateful for the opportunity, the privilege, the gift of being a parent. I think that gives me my most grounded sense of who I am. It's been the most welcome learning experience. I think classrooms can be difficult. The classroom of parenting has been kind, if you can say that. Something about seeing the reflection of yourself in a younger person, somebody who is willing to accept the wisdom that you give, but not without question or challenge.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to see who my mother used to tell me I was as a kid. And, God bless her for making it through that.
Did she enjoy the classroom of parenting with you?
I would say, yeah, my daughter is is a great student. I think she is scary in how smart she is, how emotionally in tune she is. I think similar to kind of nonprofit work where the focus is to work yourself out of a job. I think the purpose of parenting is to kind of raise the 2.0, 3.0, somebody who is equipped to go into the world well with the gifts and the foundation that you've given them, and then add their own stuff to it. And she's already doing so much of that already. She knows that she's safe with me. She knows that she's loved.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out. I don't always do this, but she has an older sister, Acacia. And even though I am now divorced and I'm not as present or available, or she's not in my household anymore, we did spend a good chunk of time together. So I do consider her my daughter as well. And she gives me the gift of listening to about 25% of the stuff that I tell her. So, you know, in different ranges, but still two young women who know that I love them very, very much, and are poised to make a deep impact in this world.
Wow, that's a beautiful light. And shout out to both these young women. And yeah, I mean, I think that creating a safe parenting space, we talk a lot about, you know, how do you hold a space for girls and for women and femfolk, and to have I'm very close to my dad, and I always appreciate talking to a girl dad who really sees the whole weight to caring for a little girl. So it's really, really beautiful.
It is. And, you know, the next part of this sermonic selection is called Salt of the Earth. But I mean, it sounds like they're very much the salt of your earth. Like, I mean, I see an adoration that you have for them as like humans. I'm actually curious as to how I feel like a lot of conversations, I don't have any physical children at this moment during this taping. But but I do think that one of the things that I hear a lot about from a lot of people is this feeling of like how bright and light and smart they knew that they were when they were younger, but then like something happened or something got disrupted, right? Is that something you think about with your daughters?
All the time.
Yeah.
There was a post, and this is a little bit different, but a couple of years ago, this is before Zuri was born, but still, while I was parenting Acacia in my household, right? And it said, I hate talking, came from the perspective of somebody who's kind of dating. And they say, I hate talking to like a beautiful young woman, and you're getting to know one another, and she's like opening up about herself, and then all of a sudden she stops talking. And it's at that moment that you realize that at some point somebody told her that didn't matter or nobody would care. And it's that sudden loss of a spark that kind of derails the building of relationship. And that has stuck with me. And in the way that I parent, I joke around with friends, all of the things that she does, I want her to hold on to in the world, right? Like advocate, be strong-willed, know your voice, know the power of it. Just don't do it with me, right? Like, don't talk to me like that. You get outside, absolutely. But there is that balance of how do I create the space for discipline lovingly without silencing it, without limiting that, without shutting her off from access to that because she's going to need it. Yeah. I just hope that she, and I believe she does, I believe they both do, know that when they're with me, the space doesn't require that shell. The space doesn't require that hardness, that defensiveness. The space doesn't require that level of advocacy because I'm already your biggest advocate. What you want to accomplish, I also want you to accomplish. I just have maybe a different sense of like how we can go about doing that. But always I want your input about why is this your motivation? Why is this your direction? Why did you make this choice? And I want it to be a conversation. But I think, you know, Zuri is 7. She's not fully at the point of understanding that disagreement doesn't mean conflict.
Yeah.
She knows what she wants. And if I'm saying something different, I am the bad guy until I can convince her otherwise. But they need that. They both need that. Her sister's a freshman in high school.
Yeah, it's different.
High school sucks. Being a first-year student in high school sucks. People already with their fully formed senses of who they are and who a person needs to be cool or acceptable or smart or funny. And, you know, you're just trying to find your way. And kids at that age are not always kind about this. So Acacia needs to have all of the weapons and tools at her disposal. I just hope that when she's with me, we can lay those aside and kind of work through things together.
There is a lot. I see we both have something.
Yeah, I'm like, ooh, unconditional love.
I will.
Good.
I think that I think sometimes you can be an adult. I find myself, and I'm just speaking very candid because I think you open the door to be very, very earnest, that I can find myself being the 7-year-old version of Zuri at times when it's not explained from your father or the people that you know love you, that like you don't have to fight me. And the reverse is also true.
Yep.
Like it's also that like at some point in time you have to be my advocate. Like I am worthy of your advocacy for you to take my side. I just appreciate you are raising a conversation that I know I haven't had with my dad. And I know that it's still a tension because I am at the age where I can recognize that at times his desire to be right has nothing to do with me. But it also doesn't always feel great to know that there are times when I also need him to be a little bit more dad than right.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're already aware of that, and you all are like going to be going through the process where you're also keeping in mind like her wholeness and what her autonomy and her whole self is showing her. I also think that there's sometimes a narrow way that a lot of parents, especially parents that adhere to a certain type of faith, see disciplining. And they lose sight of the fact that disciplining is also like pruning, like it's also steering people into the right direction versus a form of correction that then does cause silence and does cause this like binary of like, I must have done something wrong. And it does show up as I will say for me, it has shown up as to like things that I knew when I was not insecure about sharing certain things at a younger age, but then I remember when that correction came in and then I'll catch myself. So that's powerful.
Well, I love how you're also talking about your older daughter, Acacia, and just like, I also don't have biological children, but I come from a family of half adopted, half biological, 4 of us. And also like my niece and nephew who are now like young adults. How do I show up as like a proud aunt to them, like model the things that I want to model? And so I really love what you're saying. We've talked a bit on one of our first episodes about trusted adults and just how kids want a champion. Kids want someone who is also setting some boundaries. Like, you see how kids who don't have a curfew and things like that sometimes feel like maybe their parents don't care where they are versus the parents. You want to find balance, but having someone who's really your advocate, your champion, and is going to go to bat for you regardless of whatever biology brought you to the table too.
And even before we flip the table, because I definitely want to get into the center of this conversation, which feels like the center of this huge ass cake cookie that you're with me. Whatever.
I do have some more salt to call out though, if I can do that.
I was going to ask, like, is there some other salt that you want to call out? And then also this, because I love asking pastors this, how do you maintain your saltiness? How do you keep the salt moving at such a time as this, right? Like, what does it mean when it's like salt of the earth, but also like, how do you maintain that when there's so much diluting that's happening at this moment?
I think I'll call out some salt first. And I was kind of going through the Rolodex of folks whose work I really appreciate. And so I'll just kind of call out some names. I have a good buddy, Ian Thomas Minor, who has an organization called Connective. And I think they're about a decade in at this point. They've been able to leverage deep, trusting relationships with schools and sports organizations to build cultural fluency and cultural currency for urban kids. And that looks like an annual basketball tournament that happens on Martha's Vineyard. And like for kids coming from New York City, you can imagine what that's like to be in that setting and to see what's possible. I think there's something really powerful about doing something that they're familiar with, which is like sports in a new environment. I'm a huge fan of doing familiar things in unfamiliar spaces to see if it feels different and moves different. So that's been amazing for them. Along a similar vein, a really good friend, Carmia Berry, has an organization called I Am Cultured, which similarly takes young people on service and immersion trips throughout the diaspora, and they're crushing it.
Yeah, Carmia's been doing that for a
Right.
while. Yeah.
Plug, I want to be a mentor, Carmia. So if you see this,
Wow, which means you have to be listening to this podcast, Carmia.
I'm gonna send it.
Send it to me.
For sure. And then one last one, a really, really good friend of mine, from Atlanta. Oh, she's from New York, but lives in Georgia now. Brandy Smith, started an anti-racist book club for white women. And we were talking about this actually just yesterday. It was kind of in response to the election. She realized that 43% of white women voted for Harris, and said, what would happen if we took those 43% of white women who were already kind of primed for the work and gave them tools and language to have conversation in the spaces that we'll never be invited into, right? Like justice practitioners, Black women, Black femme folk, right? These are your folks. These are your family members, your friends, your country club folks, your churchgoers. What if we gave you additional language to go in and have these transformative, necessary, brave conversations? And so they're about 2 years in. They've got a membership in the hundreds, or between 200 and 300. And it's growing organically. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a paid subscription to be a part of it. With, to the phrase, put your money where your mouth is. These are women who are about that life venture and about that work. And she's brilliant. Harkening really quickly back to my time in Missouri, we took a trip down to Georgia. And she took us to a bookstore that was absolutely magical. She knows how much Zuri means to me. And she made a meaningful investment. She was like, Zuri, what do you like here? Zuri went out, picked out a couple of books and toys. And Brandon was just like, bring it up. Right? Like, and it was a small thing, but like so meaningful. Her first time meeting her, because of the strength of our friendship and just because of how much she cares about helping to raise up a generation that is thoughtful and intentional, right? Like that was huge. So she gets a shout out because she's amazing. Also, her organization gets a shout out for doing great work. And how do we preserve your saltiness? I'm going to tell myself, and then I don't remember the scripture exactly.
It's okay.
It's in Matthew, right? Where it talks about the fact that we're salt and light.
Right.
Later on in that passage, there is another usage of salt, right? So salt is either the example, what flavors, and they say that salt that isn't right for flavoring gets thrown on the ground and it's trampled underfoot. Right? So if we think of the snowy kind of experience we just had, right? Salt is meant to be a display for other people. It's meant to be something that catches the eye, that raises the eyebrow, that either serves as flavor or as the thing on the ground to keep other people from slipping. And like in conversation with my friends, I was like, I always want to be the salt that's used for flavor. I never want to be the salt that's stepped on, because even though it's serving the same purpose of helping people kind of be introduced or being kept from something that like isn't worth their time or worth their souls, one just feels a lot better. I want to be table salt, never rock salt. And when I think of when I think
so good.
when I think of those two polar opposites, I think I think my intention is just recognizing that I have a charge, I have a commission, I have a call. We were talking very briefly outside. Once you pastor, you're always pastoring, just in different spaces with different congregations, pulpit involved. And I try to make sure that the words that I'm saying, that the life that I'm living, that the example that I'm setting is something that always adds flavor, that brings people to the table, right? I want them to be drawn to goodness, drawn to light, drawn to Christ because of good flavor, not because of what's this on the bottom of my shoe.
I love so much about that. And I want to say, you really gave me an incredible vision with like the salt that stops you from slipping, because it kind of goes to your friend who's starting that book club of saying like, you know what, you can come back on this path too and not slip. You know what I mean? Like we have a path and there's room for you here too. And I think more people such as your friend need to put themselves on the line to help where we're slipping a lot as a country and a people. And so I'm gonna think about that a lot. That was really powerful.
Yeah, we don't like to preach on that second. I'm sitting here like, how many times have you heard a message about that soul? Because there's so many different ways to look at that. Like, how have your misfortunes or your slip ups been the model for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like when you're when you are whatever you call it, chosen, called, whatever, it's like everything of you is useful. Like the way I grew up talking about salt of the earth is in its utility. And like, I was a chemistry, I was a STEM kid. So like just knowing that like salt from like the beginning to the end actually doesn't lose its form. It was always like kind of wild to me. But Dean, just like that scripture, like that reminder of like, yeah, but if you never use your form, the utility though of how it's used could be for good, and it could also be, useful, but it may not be pretty. And as we get
it's not always pretty to do the tough.
It's not. Yeah. And we don't necessarily say that we want to be that model, right? But even as we like shift into this concept of like flipping the tables, I'm feeling a little differently now about it, because I think that oftentimes when we are thinking about what's going to shift and transform moments, and movement is a word that is used a lot. Oftentimes people are thinking about that table salt, the ways that I can, do the right thing and, check myself if my privilege is off, and all these like kind of check the box things. You are working with people around narrative, around story. It feels like a different way of flipping the table. I guess I want to hear from you around like, why do you feel that stories and story building is just as crucial as maybe the other forms of activism that people are engaging in right now, right? What is it about story, narrative, word, not even just spoken word? Like, what is it about that is powerful for you, right? And all of who you represent when you are also in spaces. Like I've seen some of your poetry, like so I don't want to disconnect just like the narrative, but you as the person who is helping other people develop story.
Yeah. Great question. It's not other for me. It's not another form of activism. All activism is story. This is a shirt that I'm wearing from my company at the logo, and on the back it says,
"You got merch."
I got a little bit. A little something.
Well, give me some.
Also show the emblem for a second. Get to the camera.
Game between the lines.
Between the lines.
Yeah. But on the back it says "Words create worlds," and I'll go very briefly back to my name, Din Tolbert.
I love that.
Great men of peace. As I journeyed more, I found out that Din Erasto meant many different things. Din in Islamic countries, cultures, traditions means law. Din in Hebrew, I believe means beloved, if I'm not getting that incorrect. Erasto also means beautiful, beloved, amiable. Also, Din means calm. And the more that I learned about my name, it was kind of like, how did I just like happen into being this person that is aptly described by this thing I was called? Even my size, right? Like 6'8", I'm almost 400 pounds less, almost a couple pounds recently. Even like when you look at me, it is a kind of peace-causing thing, right? In a straight way, I'm not the type of person you necessarily want to have a problem with, right? So if your mind is thinking aggression, you see me and you're like, maybe not. But then once you've interacted with me, like folks always call me gentle giant, right? It's
literally, if it was, I was like, tell me about Dean.
He's a gentle teddy bear.
Yeah.
Right?
Gentle teddy bear.
And so like Jeff and Patricia were onto something when they called me great man of peace. And so I just think about the power that naming has. I think about naming as prophecy. I think about the fact that every relationship we have with the things around us is solely contingent upon the thing we call it and the story that we tell about it, right? Like microphones, we speak into them because that's what microphones are, or that's the story that we tell about them, and it defines our utility of it. So, you know, and I thought this is cool for me. And I began to kind of operationalize this understanding for like workshops and connected with a really good friend of mine named Tiffany. And so I posed this to her and she was like, that's trash. Like also had a difficult relationship, or complicated one, I'll say complicated, with her dad. And she said he named me Tiffany because he was vain. And, you know, Tiffany crystals, like Tiffany diamonds, right? And I was like, but cool. Do you know what your name means? And she was like, no, I never thought of it outside of that. Your name means manifestation of God. She is one of the most spiritually grounded, like exploratory people I've ever met in my life. Like a conversation with her feels like a warm cup of tea. And I was like, even in error, the name that you were given was a prophecy over how you would live your life. And so we explored that. And so when I think about the importance of story, it is because words really do create the world that we live in. And that can be a very hard thing to hear or to stomach at a time like this, because we don't know when the world will be created. The Bible tells us in Genesis, we don't really know how long it takes to make a world. So sometimes we're speaking and we're talking, and, you know, in recent years, there's been a lot of conversation around like manifest the life that you want. And then folks were like, oh, we're debunking that as myth. But there's something to it. There's something to creating the way that you relate to the world around you, the way that other people relate to you based off of the language that you use, based off the story that you tell about what you're seeing. I think of hip hop, like I was born in 1982, crack era Brooklyn, like the rise of hip hop. Hip hop in its infancy was about telling stories that had not previously been given a spotlight. And that was the power of it. And now you hear people talking about the decline of hip hop. And a lot of the complaint is everybody is saying the same thing. We're not telling new or innovative or good stories. And so many of the stories that dominate, like if it's almost like the proof is a negative proof. The world that we're living in right now, how restrictive, how oppressive it feels. Look at the quality of the stories that are dominating the public sphere. They're unimaginative, they're authoritarian, they're status quo, they're not equitable. Like we're telling bad stories and it is creating a bad reality for us. And so storytelling is vastly, fundamentally important, because better quality stories will create a better world. And so I just try to share that with the people, like whether it's a workshop, whether it's facilitation, whether it's like a keynote, whether it's poetry, let's use language differently. Let's use language with intention. Let's use language believing in the power that it holds and possesses. And when you do that, there's a respect that you treat words with. I think of the fact that like words have come to mean something vastly different than what we originally understood them to. And that can be cool when it's innovative, but it's trash when it's just lazy. Or we're just using a word to mean something because we don't want to take the time to learn the other word that actually means that. And so I hold words as sacred. The word is sacred. It has incredible power to shape understanding, reality, relationship. And so we're all living a story, but we're not all living a story that we've had a hand in authoring. And I think that's a tragedy. Maybe I've said a lot and I'll stop talking.
No, I mean, Dean, you're right. You're continuing to bring messages. I had a couple of thoughts. One, it's interesting you're a poet, because I don't do poetry myself. I wish I could be better in that way with words. But whenever I think about the best poets I know, they are the people who each word really holds weight, whether it's as small as a haiku or it's a longer full page poem. But like really each word's evoking something that really means something to me. And then the other thing that really resonated for me from what you said is going back to your conversation about your daughters and Zuri in particular, about how you want the words and the space that you create to help her shape the life she wants. And, when you think about how words can be used for such good, but also for such pain and for such hurt, it adds a whole nother layer to what you're saying to me about how like words can be used for good and for beautiful storytelling. And so often they're used as the weapons of the time to hold people down or to harm people, to put people down and put them in a bucket or whatever it might be. Yeah, so there's so much fruit to what you said there. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that last part around the quality of what we're surrounded by, it's we're bombarded. It feels like we're bombarded with so many more words, and it's all trash.
Yeah.
Right?
To quote your friend, there is some trash being spewed right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is repetitive.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it is I know one of the things that was really disheartening to me with the onset of not even just the recent presidential election, but even just the campaign leading up to it, is the way that it was so hard to get to vision, like future forward vision, because so much of this is like this unimaginative filth on one side, and then it's almost like everybody else had to play Mr. Clean to clean up the filth. And it really caused us to all be distracted away from possibility and what it could be possible. It is an often overused verse, but really like the writing the vision, make it plain, we didn't quite get there. Right. And so everything kind of, and it is disheartening to see that while that may not, I feel like empires, if there ever was a time that I felt so good about, the kings and kingdoms shall all pass away. Yeah. It's definitely now. I do think there is power in feeling like everything can't last forever. But while we're here, it is disheartening to see that in a lot of different spaces, these different headships, whether it's media, politics, even education, how they are literally almost disinheriting their power with words. And it's the one thing that doesn't require a bill or an economic, access pass. It is causing a laziness right now. And there is a part of me that yearns for us to be a little bit more upset that we're not able to be surrounded with more creative spaces. You can still be critical even when things are going well, but we're not in a space of critique. We're kind of in a dunce. It's almost like a purgatory of, we're trying to do our best to maintain sanity, but that is also an admission that there is so much that's just lunacy at this moment. And when we think about young people, I guess what I want to ask you is, with that as the backdrop, are there either policies and or what are some of the things that you feel like, because this is the environment that we're in, that it does make you can answer this one of two ways. You can answer it as far as the thing that really weighs on you, that like, wow, I'm not really seeing how this is going to change. You're a young person too, for you, for your life, for your daughter's life, for the future generation. Or you can answer it from a place of, what do we need to be speaking more of? What do we need to speak more life of? What are the policies that need to be, that we need to imagine more, or open the portal to be imaginative, even if right now the environment isn't making it, as conducive to imagine?
Uh,
My brain runs in a loop, so that was a loopy question.
Like double dutch. I'm trying to
pressure cooker in here.
where I'm jumping in.
Hard hitting.
I think the field of education is typically where my focus goes. I can name every single, I mean, my love of language comes from primarily, initially, grew up in Fort Wayne, Brooklyn. My dad and I used to take trips to the Grand Army Plaza Library every weekend.
One of the best libraries.
One of the best. And there used to be, I think it was a path, like a couple of blocks up. And so we would get fresh melon, prosciutto, an egg roll.
Oh, wow.
Books, come back and just like live a semi-lavish Brooklyn brownstone.
Yes.
Barely making it, but still living like kings.
Wow, good Saturday.
Kind of existence.
Right.
Past my dad, aunts, both sides, educators. I can name Miss Wesson in 4th grade. I can name Miss Keene in 7th grade. I can name Miss Gannett in 9th grade. School breaks my heart to be as active and present in Zuri school as I am. And this is not, pointing the finger at the school. This is state of education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the social aspect of education. I used to love to go to school to learn. And I wasn't an anomaly. Miss Wesson's pizza parties for successful completion of 2 or more books was
Epic. Sounds epic.
the place to be, the thing to do. And so, like, why isn't school like that? What are the policies at the local level that have stripped schools of their identity? Is it a school choice thing? Is it as money flows out to charters and teachers are now leaving for higher salaries at charters, and so public school isn't filled with the same people who love it? Is it that policy around how much they're being paid, that it hasn't kept pace, as nothing really has, but specifically teachers, hasn't kept pace with inflation? So now people who would do it because of their good heart can't afford to do it because they're not being paid enough. How are schools ready for people like Zuri and Acacia? How are they over policing and over punishing Black girls for having language and having a little bit of neck roll behind it because
They're confident.
they should?
Right.
I'm saying too much, and hopefully the wrong persons will not view this, but I had to have a conversation with somebody because a teacher who was upset with the behavior of a 1st grade class assigned a spelling quiz as punishment. First of all, what is that? Second of all, 2 of the words on that spelling test were prison and felon.
A spelling.
On a spelling test for 1st grade students who were talking too much. What precedent are you setting? What world are you creating for my 1st graders should not know? She spelled it right because she's brilliant. My 1st grader should not know the word felon in this context.
Right.
And so I think a lot about educational policy now, in the immediate future. I think of the consequences of going back to a 2020 interpretation of Title IX.
Oh, God.
What that means to place the onus, the burden of proof on women to try to create equal protections for accusers and accused. Equitable law on its surface, cool, but this policy seems to come from the mind of a person who imagines a world where false accusations of sexual assault are on par with actual instances of sexual assault.
Exactly.
And I'm like, that person should not be trusted to make policy decisions around anything, particularly with all this going on with the list and the types of people that we're finding out run our country. Repeals, revisitations. Like, what are we doing, and what are we setting up for? Because we also know that the shape of policy is to see what can be taken away now, what will allow, so that more can be taken away from somebody else later. So I look at the slippery slope. It is an oiled slope at this point. with a great deal of caution as to what education will mean, what it will be, what it will afford access and opportunity, not only for Zuri, not only for Acacia, but for their friends, for their classmates, for teachers, for institutions. It's scary for a place that has consistently throughout my life been so life-giving, so affirming, so fun. Like, what the hell is school anymore?
I'm sitting here fuming because part of the reason why we even started this podcast is because questions like this, I feel like, should happen in community. And one of those community pillars is the church. And I am frustrated, not because I don't think there aren't individuals within faith spaces that aren't having these conversations. We're having these conversations. But I do feel like if there is a space that I feel like should hold that banner to be like, enough is enough, am I wrong to want to see more from, I say church in general, but I'm going to specifically call out the Black church, that not that it is our burden to hold it all. Let me make sure I put that out there. Sure. I just feel like it is just from both experience and historically, I feel like it is our tradition to disrupt in this way. And I don't feel like that's happening. Now, that could also be intentional, that we are not meant to see all the different things that are taking place. But I am also very much connected to the spaces that would actually disrupt. And I don't know if, I want to give grace for like fatigue, because these are also the communities that have been at the forefront on the ground. Some of them currently right now in Minneapolis, but have been in Ferguson, have been in New York City. You've been a part of ministries that have been a part of that organizing. But the things that you are raising, like education used to be one of like the backbones of what the church would fight for. Mm-hmm. And yet, even as you said, Title IX, I also have to admit that sometimes, even in those spaces, we are not as well versed about the way that even the patriarchy means that, like, there's an attack on young people, regardless of gender, but also using gender as a way to kind of either keep people silent, or maybe people aren't as used to activating in that way to be like, oh, shoot, this is not just about Zuri and Acacia. This is actually about all children, but this is the portal that they're using because society has socialized us to not respond to protect young people in that way. And I just feel like, and for that reason, you should rise up. I don't know how you, as somebody who is in the church, do you get those thoughts as well?
In the church is gracious. It's gracious.
Did I define it wrong?
No, not
say more.
I would consider you in the church because you're in my church.
It's a reasonable assumption. I think God and I are we're figuring things out. No, I think
fair.
For some of those same reasons, for some of those same looking around and seeing the church's response, I've had questions. What do I owe God versus what do I owe this institution?
That's how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Do I owe them membership when they've paid me in silence? Like, I don't know. Yes, no, maybe so. I don't know. Still figuring it out.
Do you think they own membership?
Yeah, who owns the keys to the church?
I'm just
the membership keys.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll throw that in the figuring out.
Throw it in the figuring out. I will say there are folks that we know are doing the work. I didn't mention this in the Salt of the Earth conversation, but I should have, right? My dear friends, Pastors Andrew and Gabby Wilkes, right? Double Up Experience, doing it in all of the ways, in all of the spaces and all the places, doing phenomenal work. But they do feel like the outlier.
Yeah.
Folks who are unapologetic in naming the things, they feel like the outlier. Folks who are showing up in political spaces and not just the mayor's faith brunch.
Yeah.
Folks who are able to hold to task and hold accountable even candidates that they're in support of.
Yeah.
Folks who are not linking arms, right? But I think that there's something powerful about like that civil rights imagery, right? But folks who are able to stand next to imperfect allies and say, we disagree on this, but this is an issue that deserves our attention and we agree on that. And so let's see how we can move forward together. It feels like it's not happening enough. I do wish that it were happening with more consistency. And I'm also holding space for the fact that everything is hard and everybody's tired and something should happen beneath the radar. Right. I even I thought deeply about what to say, what to share here, because I'm not a fan of giving away playbooks. I don't want to tell you what I'm doing so you can preempt a defense against it, right? Like when I hit you in the mouth, I want it to be a surprise. When this thing is toppled, when the patriarchy is attacked, I don't want you to see it coming because you've had years, decades, centuries, and narratives that have become ingrained in public spheres of thought. You don't deserve the upper hand here, right?
Yeah.
Like you're cemented into American culture. And so if I'm going to knock down that statue,
we'll know it when it happens.
You'll know when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting, if you my perpetual flipping the table, which is, and the reason we felt called to do this, both coming out of different churches, but also profoundly people of faith. And like, I also struggle too sometimes of like, particularly, I can't speak to, growing up in a Black church. I can speak to my beautiful experience growing up in the small Lutheran church that my dad was the pastor of. But what I'm seeing happen nationally, really hurt my heart so badly that if, we talk about this of like, what are all these white Christians doing out there who are acting like white Christian nationalists? Because that we won't go into a whole episode on that. We've already had a whole episode on that. But to me, it's the antithesis of Jesus's teachings. So when are we serving the teachings of men? And I use men intentionally there, versus the teachings of a higher power, the teachings of Jesus or whoever gives you that strength and light and that peace and creates that safe space that you create for your daughters. That's a type of omnipresent vision that I want. I want a person I want a God who's a God of love and a God who is a God of togetherness and connectivity, not something that's using us to turn against each other. And I think that all of these things kind of bleed into one another when we talk about the patriarchy and also how it's affecting education. To your point, these same value systems get eroded to the place like we all grew up at the same time, right? So not that the 90s were perfect or the 80s or 90s were perfect for coming up to education, but the ability for even teachers to be shepherds of a bigger purpose, for teachers to be able to say, like, I'm here because I want to educate kids, not spend the whole day either having to reprimand or go to a system. I mean, I had some wonderful teachers who broke the book for me because they knew I was creative and I wanted to have my hand in a million different pots. And for some teachers, I was a handful because I was chatty and had a million special projects. But here we are decades later, I'm still chatty and I still got a million special projects, right? So the teachers that could see that's who I was, I think were the hands of something bigger for me and in my life journey. So I think it's all, I think so much of what you're saying is so tied to, I think, what deeply pains me to this day of like, none of these things are serving anyone at a certain point.
Right.
And really, I personally feel called in this moment to say, like, I'm going to use my words to go back to your words to say, like, that's not the teachings I heard from my growing up in the church. That is actually, hate never came out of the words that I was taught. I've heard about faith, hope, love, and what kind of, and bless the children. That's what I heard.
I mean, and Alexis knows, and I say this with love, and she knows that my conflict is that I think the both and has always been there. I think America has always been a white Christian nationalist nation, stemming from a European like nationalism and using Christianity specifically, but not only Christianity, using faith as a way to indoctrinate. But I think for me, what I am hoping in the narrative world is also how we call out maybe what hasn't always been pronounced, but always been there. Like it actually means something that there are people that attend spaces where faith, hope, and love is the narrative, but it's not matching the policies.
That's right.
And it's not matching the policies for some children.
Yeah.
And if therefore, if this thing that is supposed to be this most powerful force that is bigger than even just flesh and bone is calling us to practice something and we're not practicing it, that to me is also problematic of like what, and it's not just white Christian nationalism, it's white people that say that they're Christian. And we've talked about this, like how, what is a Christian? Like, what is that? If we're talking about words, like it's interesting to me how touchy it feels for individuals. But I do think what I'm hoping is that, not what I think, what I'm hoping is that in this conversation about narrative, that we can call out the hard thing, because those things deserve words too, if we're going to know what we're going to fight for. I feel like there's this like capital K clan that people like are always afraid of, even in white spaces. But I always tell people it's never the hooded sheets. It's the comfort. It's the paralysis. Some of it may not even feel comfortable, but it's the paralysis of like, I am in this world and I know that there are other people of faith that are suffering. What then is our calling at this moment? So I mentioned the Black church specifically just because of your some of the shared spaces that we're in, because if we're going to be honest, I feel like it's been a lot of the Black church's responsibility to, or they have taken on the mantle of like doing that disruptive work through various movements. But I do think I struggle with like whether what we're seeing is a real fatigue, like not even just like one or two people tired, like a real fatigue. Like it can't just be on the span of Black people to always be this consciousness, or to always be this salt that is thrown on the ground to be trampled on for everybody else to get liberties and for everybody else to get free and for everybody else, while everyone gets to still call themselves Christian. Like it's actually, I think, the very uncomfortable conversation that people don't want to have about like, it would actually cause us, this segment is called Flipping the Tables, because Jesus didn't just see the injustice and then talk about it or write about it. Jesus did something that even at that moment alone was an offense, that like his crucifixion could happen way earlier than when it did. And they tried, right? And I just find, man, the day tried. If we could really follow the many times that Jesus really could have gotten it, very quickly, the story that sticks out for me is always when he was in the space, pulled out the demon from the young from the guy and that was in the what would be considered like the cemetery or whatever, and called them to go into the swine, and the swine jumped off. And it says that they turned on Jesus. Like, yo, you gotta get out of here. You messed up our money. You messing up our economy. And it said that he fled. And I say that jokingly and lightheartedly to say that like doing that right thing, if that is our model, we also have to be honest about the fact that like the person that we serve was also always targeted and was always under threat. And I the only explanation that I have, human explanation, is that for patriarchy to exist, it's quite possible that Jesus is the mascot that they want by word, but the practice of who Jesus is not actually powerful enough for them in the way that they see power. They don't want to see a Jesus that's running away. They don't want to see a Jesus that's, willing to get whipped. They don't want to, that's actually not how patriarchy works. You need a Jesus that says who deserves to be saved and who deserves to, you know what I mean? Like, I think that.
And many of the disciples of the time wanted Jesus to rise up and be a king. Go be a worldly king,
Exactly. Like, don't wash my feet. I want to serve somebody who's bigger than that when Jesus
You want to start somebody who has a gold toilet, you know? Remember that?
I don't know if I remember that.
Trump.
Yeah, it's
Me?
just a little too far. Yeah. First, a little closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, right at the end. Sorry, I wish I knew. I saw it earlier. But yeah, no, we can go back and forth, but I feel like the powerful thing about what you opened up is it's not that people don't know what to say. I do feel like it's people are afraid to have it. And we're not doing it perfectly, but I think, and it's not just black and white, but Alexis and I know that like some of this has also been designed for us not to have this conversation with each other. And it's like somebody's got to, disrupt the Joe Rogans of the world. And by golly, we're going to get there.
Creeping up the list.
But I mean, there's so much that you raised. And I don't know, Alexis, if you...
Yeah, I mean, I just want to you seem like a teacher in many forms. To me, it's really interesting that I do think the great spiritual leaders are also teachers. I think the great parents are also teachers. I think the great storytellers are also we're going to get to even a more hopeful part. But in this moment in time, what keeps you in movement and momentum as opposed to just being like, I'm going to flip the table, leave the table here, and I'm done. I go back and forth from some days just being totally depressed about what's happening in the world, but also recognizing I have so much power and creativity and things that I can bring to help make it better. How are you keeping the table moving?
Yeah. I have maybe an unhealthy obsession with the way that Jesus did it.
Oh, the way that Jesus
flipped the table.
Oh, did it?
And not just flipping the table, but the way that Jesus was, the way this ultimate victory that we talk about in, the death, burial, and resurrection. This very counter patriarchal ways of thinking about power. He submitted himself to death, to beat death. I think about that. I've structured ministries around, shout out to the third day. I've structured ministries around what it means to beat something from inside of it. The tables were flipped inside of a space.
Right.
So I think what keeps me going is my curiosity. And this is where I thought intentionally about what to share and what not to share. Of what can I see from the spaces that I've been invited into that I won't actually have an opportunity to flip until they invite me in more. Oh, that looks uncool over there, but they haven't invited me over there yet. I'm only right here. So what's the cost versus benefit? What's the give and take? What's the push and pull? How long is it sustainable for me to remain here until they invite me over there? Am I doing damage to my soul by kind of not playing the game, but, making sly comments as Brooklynites often do, as opposed to overtly pointing the finger and saying the same. Yeah. Once I get over there,
it's over.
All bets are off.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't even have good leverage yet to flip this table. I'm not in the right position yet. And so I think of that. I think of the long game. I think of silence that serves a purpose. Submission that is a tool of subversion. And I think to your point of parents being teachers, Zuri's taught me a lot of it.
Yeah.
What are the ways, not to be crafty or shady or sly or sneaky a little bit, because all parents are also a little sneaky, great ones anyway.
The great ones.
I know what we should be doing in this moment. I know that calling her out for not getting her shoes on right now when we have to leave is only going to make her hunker down more. There's a reason why she doesn't want to get dressed to go right now.
Yeah.
So what happens if I approach this moment with curiosity instead of the strong-handed discipline? Get your shoes on right now. We gotta go. We're running late. What's up, buddy? Like what's going on? What were you feeling? Right? What's going on in the moment? What is your priority? What would you rather be doing? Because that opens up the conversation. And then through conversation, I'm familiar enough with the patterns of how we speak to one another to say, all right, I get that. Is there a way that we can do that when we get back? But this thing that we have to do is actually really important. So can we work together? One of the questions I ask her often, can we be good teammates to one another right now? I learned so much about patience in getting the desired outcome from being a parent. I learned so much about having the conversation you want to have in the language of the conversation that they want to have. I learned so much about we both want this thing, but you are so sure that your way about it is correct that we can't move together yet until one of us sees something differently. And so how can I help you see something differently? Or going back to point number 2, how can I see what I'm looking for in the way that you understand it so then I can articulate our shared goal that way? Like being a parent has made me so much better at every other thing that I do. And so I think, again, what keeps me going is I'm not at the point of maximum or most effective leverage yet.
You know, you've such a way with painting words, and I'm definitely a visual learner, so I can always kind of like hear what you're saying visually. What an analogy for the time we are in today.
For sure.
You know, I always say my favorite trait in somebody is curiosity. Because if you're truly curious about somebody else, like, if you and I get along great in the podcast, but we've had tough conversations. We're reconciling who we are, how we show up from different spaces. But I'm curious. I want to know more about her as a human being and understand what her journey was like. And if I'm curious about her, I'm not making about like anything that she's saying to me is a reflection on me because it's actually not about me. And I think like as we're talking about these tough conversations, like whether it's whiteness or problems in the church, whatever else it might be, it's like if you're truly trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, whether it's a kid who like maybe actually has a very viable reason why they don't want to put their shoes on at that very moment, but we always assume the person is not always. We're not assuming here, but frequently people will assume they're trying to be tough to me right now, or the kid's trying to make it so I can't get out the door, or this person's trying to hold back some right from me by saying I also would like rights, like. And so I find your curiosity statement to be such a balm in so many ways. If we just asked a couple questions of people,
Yes.
I'm not saying it would solve it overnight, but I think it'd be an excellent gateway to better conversations and better understanding of one another. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sit with a lot of what you raised because I do think, in the political spaces where a lot of people assume from day one, of course, they're qualified. They're qualified to do every and anything. What consultant doesn't think that they can't do any and everything? To hear someone who also is of service in an array of, and in so many different ways, to say, yeah, I'm aware that there at some point in time there are levers that you will push and pull, but I'm also aware where I'm at right now. There have been some conversations, one with a podcast that I think we both mutually like, grits. Shout out to Deontay Kyle and grits and eggs, and we were able to have a conversation a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that he was talking about, even in the concept of futurism, was that like you have to have a realistic grasp as to where you're at right now. And so as you're speaking, I hear this real, assessment of like, I see what's over there and I see where I'm at. And there are a lot of spaces that I can have influence in,
Mm.
but I am not only curious about the places of power, which I want to call out power, because power has a way of speaking to each other. They have a way of being exclusive. I mean, in some ways, power is equated with the exclusivity of it. And so if you're thinking about really like disruption, you have to do this assessment of where you are in relation to that power. So you calling that out as a 6'8" guy who's not exactly the dude that you said that anybody would want to mess with, to still have
Very
those
gentle
conversations,
giant.
right? Gentle giant. To have, I just appreciate the way
Yeah.
you modeled in just the asking of those questions, sequentially, even how for other people that are positioned to at least be told by society that you have all the power in the world, and you're like, not so much. Like, I could also go in there and do the wrong thing and never get invited ever again, right? And, I struggle with the whole concept of, I think even MLK struggled with, like, am I leading my people towards the burning house, right? This conversation about when is close too close, and what is the impact of being in really imperial designed spaces trying to create mass change for your community. It's a tough one. I don't know if we'll grapple all of that even with this podcast, but I do appreciate that I feel like you're speaking to those of us that do either gain entry, and Alexis and I have worked in spaces where it's like we can take a step back and be like, wow, you know, aside from the critique of I should have done this, should have done that, we were also in those spaces, right? Um, I feel like it's the reverse of sinners. Not that you're not that you're Remick, but did watch it again, and I actually loved his character, because I loved his patience.
Mhm.
Like his patience, knowing that like I gotta be invited in is not here trying to glorify, the devil, but like it is this reminder, two things as we close. It's like it's the reminder of like to do future forward moving work, you also have to disruption matters. I saw this also, somebody put a thread out there that said disruption matters. And then after that, right, you got to get really strategic. And I think what I'm hearing from you is like, you're already thinking about the strategy before even the disruption. But also number two, which gets back to something you said earlier that I'm also going to be sitting with, but I'm also not going to announce that disruption either. So you're actually never really going to know when I'm going to flip the table or not. Yeah. And I want to hold, as I said earlier, that it may very well be that there are plans that are happening right now, subversive plans that I don't even know about. And if they advance us forward, so be it. I don't need to know about it. I don't need to know all the plans. I just hope people are planning and that they're talking in the spaces and putting to life through words what those plans are so that the right people can be invited and then disrupt and flip the table and then build, right? You can't just keep disrupting. So, I guess I just want to add, if there, as we've made it to the conclusion of the Do This in Remembrance, if there's any last words that you would like for people to take away. I know, let me tell you something. Dean knows I say this everywhere. Dean will pray you down. If you've ever seen Dean do a sermon, 7 last words, any type of 7 last words.
I saw a glimpse today.
Which for people, if people don't know, 7 last words is basically a commemoration of the 7 final words. Is it 7 final words that Jesus gave before he gave up the ghost? I've seen Dean. Dean will not announce the fire, but I know as a child, I do think Dean's prayer was the first prayer where I opened my eyes and I was like, oh no, I know we're supposed to close our eyes when people are praying, but
you need to see what's happening.
I need to see what happened, because the gentle giant did announce that this is how He brings hail from the sky. So however you want to
No
do
pressure,
your, no pressure. Just want people to know what's possible. But yeah, like anything that's final, anything that's on your heart at this moment.
Yeah. It's I think quite poetic that this is a remembrance section. My mother in the faith, I don't always love that term, a woman who certainly saw something in me and challenged something out of me. The late Reverend Felicia Faye Long. Uh, used to always say, I give because I have because I give, therefore I have never without. So as we think about the fatigue and the difficulty of this season, to know that as enduring as difficulty has been and can be, our ability to survive it, not as individuals, but as community, is at least as enduring. That there will have to be some giving. There will have to be, for sustainability, some having. But as long as we are healthily engaging with that cycle, we will find that somehow the oil stays. Somehow the cupboard does not run empty. Somehow the food keeps showing up. The fishes and the loaves. My cousin Imani also has this saying that I've kind of grafted together. She says, there is no lack. There is only abundance. And that is such a reality shifting story to tell ourselves. And the hope is that we all find an anchor in that. That there are an abundance of stories that have not yet been told. There is abundance in the outcomes that we communally work toward. There is an abundance of freedom and of power to share. It does not have to be consolidated among the elites and the exclusive. We all have been given the power, and it's a power that was given to us in the garden to name, to shape and create a world through the intentional use, the careful use, the loving use, the kind use, the generous use, the divine use of our language. And we can say better things to shape a better world. We can be better people. And it does not matter the stories that have been told or the narrative that we've been living under. The only lasting impact of those stories is it gave us words that we can use and repurpose and refashion into better stories to be told. And I hope that we all rise to the occasion of doing that.
Thank you so much, Dean.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is really, really thought-provoking and beautiful. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you for being with us in community, and thank you for sharing this journey with us.
As always, keep asking questions, keep taking care of yourself, and keep showing up with intention.
And we'll come back with more community and more light.
Until then, stay grounded, stay hopeful.
See you next time on The Carpenter's Daughter.